Only several people know about what happened with Blueberry. I've never told all the confusing bits and pieces strung properly together. It took me 2 weeks to finish writing this. I would start typing, and some memories and details that I had filed away extra well would emerge and come flooding back. I showed this to my husband before putting it up here, so that he could know about this before the internet does. I think he's still stunned. He knew Blueberry as well, but I think now he understands some of my quirks and nervous tics. Sophomore year in high school was when it started. That would be 2003, I believe. His real name was Michael D, but he was called Blueberry by our circle of friends. I have long forgotten the story of the moniker, but I imagine it was selected mostly to distinguish from the many other Michaels around. He was a tall, gawky, acne-afflicted junior who had a hands-in-a-pocket angry walk, as well as a deep dimple in the middle of his chin, and an absolutely intelligible manner of speaking. Intelligible to the point where his secondary nickname was Michael Mumble. I don't remember anything in particular about that meeting, really. Just a few passing words, a mutual friend stepping in to wave an introductory hand back and forth, while repeating our names to an other in quick bursts like a squeeze on a rifle. I was a spunky 15-year-old discovering a whole new diverse world out there. And in retrospect, I see how my giddy naivete left the door wide open for Blueberry to step through. He would talk or mumble to me before first period. I struggled to understand what was said behind his tight lips that hardly moved, so our interactions were usually brief and consisted mostly of me smiling brightly and nodding along before politely excusing myself. I often picked up on his awkward anger and aggression, stuffed so deep and snug inside his 6'3" frame. All teenagers are angry. Hell, even spunky me had my moody sprees. But Blueberry's anger was different. It was warped, twisted, stubborn, narcissistic, permeating, calm, autistic kind of anger. I remember thinking to myself that it just burned the air around him. Being 15 at the time, I had no car, so I took my lunches at a Subway that sat 2 blocks away from my school. Sometimes I went with friends, but more often, I went by myself. I liked the quiet and chance to regroup from school's chaos. He appeared one day, mumbling away across from me in a booth while I pasted on a slightly puzzled smile, lips tight over my mouth full of food, wondering on what on earth he was saying. Then, the letters came. My best friend Christy and I wrote tons of notes during our class periods to fold up into neat squares and swap with each other in the halls. This was how we plotted and schemed before the advent of text messaging. We had designated hallways where we would hand off our paper squares, and one of these hallways was where I would see Blueberry as well. One day, I had just slyly palmed Christy's note in my hand when I suddenly felt a tap on my shoulder, and a paper slid into my other hand. It was Blueberry, staring at me with a slight smile. With a surprised chuckle and a nod of acknowledgement, I tucked his note into my purse along with Christy's. I soon found out that not only was he Michael Mumble, he was Michael Muddled. While his handwriting was neat and printed, and I was far from an illiterate, I could not make head or tails out of his train of thought. He wrote as he spoke, in a mashed, inverted manner, wherein the subject matter was vague, at best. All I could make out of the letters he would give me, from that day on, was that I was part of the subject matter. Something about my considerations, or me not seeing. Filling up the paper margins were badly drawn frogs, babbling about druids and more frogs. I got these letters often, usually daily. I probably wrote a short one back to him once, maybe twice at most, but they came steadily as ever. As spring wound down, I began to get more uneasy around him. To the group, Blueberry was Blueberry, just a normal little oddball in the background. Began to avoid him, but he seemed blind to that. And in retrospect, at the age of 25, I can safely say that people pick up when you are avoiding them. But not Blueberry. The lunchtime interceptions and notes continued when he could manage it. And then came the gifts. I was a writer back then. I always had notebooks that I constantly filled up with any scribblings that came into my head. I wrote in the cheap, smaller size spirals that you can pick up at any drugstore. I knew better than to buy nice, fancy ones. They'd last me a week at best. but it was a fancy heavy-bound journal that Blueberry gave me one day in the hallway after school. I didn't know what to say. It was an odd gift from someone whom I barely knew. There was something tainted about the journal. It was beautiful, a plush notebook etched with the design of an ancient map of China, and I swear the covers were of suede. It was expensive, enchanting, and it gave me the chills. The first 10 pages consisted of yet another letter that he'd penned to me. The first several paragraphs talked about how I was the only one who understood him, and he loved me. I stopped at that point. I could never bring myself to write in or throw it away. Instead, I tucked it in a keepsake box that slept underneath my bed, along with the other notes and trinkets. I told myself that I was giving out the wrong signals. I told myself I was being silly and overreacting to someone who was perfectly nice. Christy told me, "You're lucky that someone buys you something so nice, without even trying to sleep with you." Other friends told me, Blueberry's just a goof, but he's alright. I was grateful when summer rolled around. Junior year, when school started back up, I had a boyfriend named Adam. Brightly dyed hair with a red car, so Blueberry inevitably faded into the background. Whether he liked it or not, he had no driver's license, nor a wish to get one, strange for being 18, as he was then, preferring the alternative of a bicycle and then walked everywhere. Looking back, I realized that this made it harder for him to intercept me at lunch, when I zipped off to meet my older boyfriend at home for the hour-long break. The only times I would see Blueberry was when I was pulling out of the parking lot, and I would see him during his brisk, frustrated fuel strides in whatever direction. His eyes were always either angrily fixed at a point in the distance, and his chin was set in a tight line of frustration, or seemed to be searching the sea of high school students flooding the parking lot for me. Every now and then, he would spy my cherry red Volvo station wagon, which was embarrassingly hard to miss, and would just stare. For the most part, humans can get a decent read on others. This wasn't the case with Blueberry. I couldn't make heads or tails of him and his behavior around me. And eventually, my teenage hormones said fuck it. And by fuck it, I mean, I made no more efforts. I decided the best way to fix the situation was to not give a shit. If he talked to me, I would respond with short sentences, then bluntly turn and walk away. I didn't avoid him, but neither did I approach or wave at him in the hallways like I had the year before. It was just another guy in the background. Let me also add, in the meantime, the letters never stopped. And the gifts came almost like clockwork. A journal left on my car with the first 4 pages scribbled with words that I never bothered to read. A bouquet of daisies or roses given to me in the hallway that I promptly gave to a lonely-looking freshman as I turned the next corner. A book of fairy tales on my birthday, also with an inscription inside. The journals, books, and letters were hardly ever actually read, nor used, and all found a new home in that keepsake box underneath my bed. I could never explain why I felt compelled to tuck them into a keepsake box, but I just did. At times I would feel guilty, and I would look for anything that I was doing to lead this insane boy on what on earth compelled him to buy things for a girl that just didn't care. But in the end, my teenage psyche always lost interest and went back to scheming over how I was going to get around curfew and catch that wicked show happening at the local music venue on a school night. My junior year of high school wound down much like this. When school let out for the summer, I was just happy to be able to be with my friends and not worry about Blueberry. He was a senior, and that had been his last year in the school with us. I came home one afternoon and sauntered into the kitchen to grab a snack. My father had just come home from work, barely beating me by 5 minutes, as I could tell how he'd already taken off his suit jacket and brought in the mail. He was leaning against the kitchen counter and plucking the bills from my mother's overflow of catalogs when I walked up to peck him on the cheek and offered him one of the 2 apples I'd retrieved. "Hey there, hon," he mumbled, taking the apple. "Whoa, hold up, kid. You have mail, lucky you." He flipped a rectangular manila envelope towards me, and I took it. Who's sending me snail mail? I thought to myself, popping open the sealed flap. Maybe it's Grandma. Ooh, does it feel like a check in here? I start to hum a Smith song as I pry open the brads that anchor the flap. I pull the letter out. It's a single page of lined notebook paper. I shake the page, and my eyes focus on the first line. I really don't want to shit. I know that handwriting. Blueberry. I remember yelping in surprise and dropping the letter as if it had burned me. I remember grabbing the envelope and flipping it over to where the addresses should be. I don't know why. I already knew it wouldn't make me feel better to see the street numbers I called home, along with my name carefully printed in the center. It did make me feel better, however, to see that a city in Colorado was listed the top left's return address. Blueberry had left Texas, or so I hoped, because it sure made me sick to see that there was no postage stamp. He had to have hand-delivered it to my home, which he somehow tracked down. The letter frightened me, both its content as well as the fact that Blueberry had found out where I lived. I grilled all of our mutual friends and swore that they hadn't been the ones to give out the information. In the letter itself, he had sounded almost angry with me, or upset that I hadn't made good on some sort of agreement. Who knows? Thankfully, that was the last I heard of Blueberry. For several years, anyway. In high school, I was creeped out by a strange boy called Blueberry. Those events took place in 2005. Fast forward to spring of 2008. I was living in Albuquerque, New Mexico, but preparing to move back to my hometown to kick a nasty drug habit and get a fresh start. I had taken a break from packing up my apartment and headed to the library to clear my head and to check my MySpace. There was a friend request waiting for me when I logged in. Yup, the cliche reappearance of the protagonist. It was Blueberry. Still to this day, I have no idea what possessed to accept the request, but I did. I accepted it. Almost immediately, I got a message from him. It was quite civilized, actually. He asked how I was doing, and even offered an apology for his behavior in high school. I was pleasantly surprised and appreciated the gesture, and sent him a response saying so, along with a brief synopsis of my plans on moving back home, only after ensuring that he was still in Colorado, as his profile said. By the time I clicked send, my allotted time on the computer was up, so I logged out and headed back to my place to prepare for the move back home the next day. 3 days and 1 state later, I was back at home and finally feeling human again as the bumps and bruises of the move subsided. It had been a busy few days, and I gladly popped down in front of my father's laptop to check my email and my social media. I logged into MySpace and began to work through the stack of accumulated messages. I opened up the reply from Blueberry. It had been sent almost instantly after I'd sent my reply several days ago. Well, that's a coincidence, huh? Blueberry was moving back to our hometown as well. Godspeed to him and all his endeavors was all I thought of it. I didn't think I'd be running into him often, as our old group of friends had long disbanded to get married, move away, or get locked up. I had just picked up a job waiting tables at the 24-hour diner chain Denny's, and enrolled in a summer college course. Life went on, but not for that long. I just started a swing shift at work, and I was at the counter filling up salt and pepper shakers and setting up the floor before the dinner rush hit, when he walked in. I knew who he was while he was still in my peripheral. He slid into the swivel chair and mumbled what I can only imagine was a hello, then put his right hand on mine, which was wrapped up in a salt tumbler I had been refilling. Terror and confusion painted my insides. Another spike in blood pressure as he squeezed down hard, if only for a second, before releasing his grip. He stared and he mumbled. This is the part of the story that I find myself taking the longest time to write, because I keep exiting out of my word program and distracting myself with the unimportant busy work to avoid writing about what comes next. You see, this is the part where I left the door wide open for him to step in and catch me off guard. I could have prevented all of this had I just done something different. It's something I'm still angry with myself over, and it's never easy to talk about. So I'm probably going to skip out on a lot of the details and deliver the bare bones. I've dragged my heels through the story to this point, to use all the details you know about me and Blueberry that I've given so far to put together the big picture. This is going to be the first time I've ever told this story in its entirety, much less the final chapter, which I may or may not be able to finish. I should have told him to fuck off that day. I should have listened to my gut, which was screaming profanities at my rationalizing everything away brain. I knew that he moved from Colorado back down to our hometown because I was there. I knew that he'd taken that reply on my MySpace as a sign of my declaring undying love to him inside his twisted mind. I knew deep down that he was still that same scary fucker, that one that found out where I lived in high school, but a part of me had truly thought that we matured past that point. but all that was wishful thinking. Instead, I smiled politely, nodded, and excused myself to do anything but to be around him. I ended up in the bathroom dry heaving. Anxiety, it's a bitch. I was stuck. I was the only waitress on the floor until 7, which was a good 3 hours away. I had a credit card payment due in 3 days. I could not leave the floor. I remember talking to myself like a crazy person. He'd only said one word. I was being ridiculous. Nobody is twisted enough to do that over a girl that's barely spoken to him or returned any affections. Ludicrous. And who knows what he actually said back there or what he meant by touching my hand. He could just be surprised to see me. So who's the crazy person here? It's me. Then why had he looked at me as if he was gloating, as if he was hungry? Dry heave to the porcelain gods again, and dart off to the floor. Stay busy, stay away from the counter, stay away from Blueberry. Unbeknownst to me, while I went about avoiding him, Blueberry had applied for a position as a dishwasher, which is always open in diners, and was hired on the spot. I found out the next day as I clocked in and saw him carefully studying the employee schedule. Should have said something then, but I didn't. I was afraid. I didn't have time to think either. I managed to somehow change clothes, tie my apron, dry heave yet again, before my shaking legs found their way onto the floor. Like I said before, so much of it is a blur. I'm typing as fast as I can to get to the end of this nightmare fucking story. I don't remember many specific incidents leading up towards the end. I remember Friday night bar rush when he yelled at a 65-year-old man, a regular of mine that had come to think of a grandpa, because he thought he was looking at me with pervert eyes. I remember how many times he tried to stop me while I was neck deep in the weeds with drunk and hangry customers, catching my arm, rougher each and every time to make me stop and look at him. The last time he grabbed me so hard a bruise bloomed in place of his fingers the next morning. I remember the look of pure hatred and frustration that he gave every one of my male customers. And I remember how he said he would slit them ear to ear if they ever touched me. I remember when my shift ended, and I held all of it in until I made it into the walk-in freezer. I just let out half a sob when the freezer door swung open, and Blueberry had himself in front of me. I remember the metallic taste of fear as I looked up at him. What next? He was looking forward to the talk we would have after work, he said. The talk about us? Oh God, no. I remember wanting to scrub my forehead with lye from where he bent down and kissed me before exiting the walk-in. He made me sick being so close to me. Dirty. I remember the desperate need to leave. I clock out, knowing that he won't be off for hours after me. I can escape. I pull out of the parking lot and stop at a red light 2 blocks down and find a friend to stay with. Figure this all out. God, I need my job. The passenger door opens. It's him. When the hell did my passenger door not lock? Did he? He broke my lock. And fuck, he's now in my car. I'm numb. He acts like this is a normal thing for us to do. My logic freezes. He gives me the directions to his house, telling me how happy he is that I've finally come around after all these years of denying what was between us. I can't breathe. A part of me is giving up. A part of me is so mad at myself for being so weak and unable to stop all of this. Wait, I'm not completely numb. There's still some anger in me. I'm starting to get angry at this person who's repeatedly refused to take no for an answer, who intentionally came back to our town with the narcissistic, presumptuous intent of claiming me now that I'd supposedly come around. He came into my job and made sure to move in fast, hard, and aggressively, because he knew this is what I would do. The only words that I'd ever heard him speak clearly and without mumbles was the threat to slit my customer's throat from ear to ear. He walked out of his first night on the job just to follow me and then got into my car as I was at a stoplight. Fuck that. As I had the opportunity to sit and process the absurdity and the increasingly disturbing levels of the situation, I became temporarily lost in a fugue state of memory, realization, and gritty resolve. We reached this place and I snapped back to reality immediately. I saw that the front lawn was teeming with drunken partygoers. His roommate had thrown a keg party and drew enough people to fill a high school stadium. To this day, I consider this the only reason I felt brave enough to do what I did next. There were too many people around to hear and see things. I knew it, and he knew it, and he didn't seem happy with it. I followed him into his house. I let him take me to his room. I stood in the open doorway and balked as he tugged on my wrist to pull me into the room for God knows what reason. It was like another person was speaking through me. Then I realized how quiet it was. I swear to God, everyone in that party stopped and stared at us. It was so quiet, and all the blood in my body was pumping in the war dance of fear disguised as rage. I saw him falter. We locked eyes. I could tell that he was grasping, and then I tried to pull away. He was strong, and then he screamed. God, I'll never forget how angry he looked. He wasn't mumbling. He screamed so clearly.
Just fucking lay with me tonight. Why won't you just lay on the bed, you
He lurched forward like a tension-bearing spring to drag me into his room. It was at that point that the bodies flew at him. Several of them. They tackled Blueberry to the floor. Beer was flying everywhere. The froth was landing in my hair. My shirt was wet with the faint scent of fresh hops. They were screaming. Hands on hands. Girl hands. Nails digging into Blueberry's iron fingers. I could feel my blood slowing at the pockets where he had me firmly held. Arms must be blue, I thought to myself before I saw the girls. 3 of them, blonde and red.
Run, come on, get away from him,
They yell. His fingers are slipping claws, but the long solar nails of all 3 women are too much. He flinches with a jerk that forces him to let go. He disappeared under the heap of bodies. My legs finally worked again. I ran to my car. I ran the fuck away. I still don't know who the men who tackled him were. Neither do I know the names of the women who scratched their own nails into Blueberry's skin so that he would let go, and they could flank me in protection as I ran to the car. Still to this day, I don't think I've ever been faced with a truer definition of solidarity than the act right there. They didn't even know who I was when they all dove in. I don't know what kind of spiritual force is out there, roaming the purple evenings with those who are alone. But more nights than not, I say a little thank you to the skies, hoping at least one of them hear me. I owe those strangers a great deal. Now that I've said that, the thing of this part of the story is, it's not over. It hasn't gotten bad yet, not by a long stretch. The final part was the hardest to write. Still get sick to my stomach thinking about it at times. Here goes. At this point, I wish I could say that it's over. It's not. Stalkers are persistent. They don't think like you and I do. What I had done the night that I told Blueberry no was something good and bad. Good in that I had acted loudly enough to become a person to him, not an object. Bad in the sense that I had set down boundaries that conflicted with his intents. And I had done it in front of a crowd of people, embarrassing him. I knew that where he had just seen me as a living doll before, he would now see me as someone to be punished. This is what I thought to myself as I stared at the ceiling, stained with the sharp gold light of a noon sun. I had barely slept after crashing through my front door and quickly, desperately checking each window and locked my father's front door before collapsing in a heap by the bed. My father wasn't home, as he usually stayed over at his girlfriend's place. I didn't mind. It was nice to see him in love. It took the years off his face, and I didn't want to be the one to put those years back on with my predicament. I didn't want to see the look in his eyes if he saw branches of broken blood vessels, blossoms that ran up my arms in dull spirals of pain. Didn't want to see him and Blueberry in the same room. Didn't want him to feel disappointed or upset with me. I'd kicked the habit and worked diligently on my decision-making skills, but my helplessness in dealing with Blueberries seemed to me a return to a life I thought I'd left behind. No. Better to figure this out myself. He had spent enough sleepless nights worrying about me. Suddenly thankful for my parents' recent divorce. My mother stayed behind in the house I grew up in. My father had rented out a lovely house in an adjacent neighborhood. Blueberry couldn't possibly find me here. With that comforting thought, I pulled myself out of bed and got dressed. I remember picking a shirt with sleeves to cover those bruises that he'd left. I didn't care that it was easily 100 degrees outside. Anything to keep from seeing and remembering his brand on me. I padded towards the kitchen. stopping at the large glass window panes that face the open schoolyard across the street. Pulling back the blinds, I took in the grassy, sun-drenched view. I liked the house. It was open. I could see anybody coming. But it was quiet for now. In the kitchen, I stepped into the cupboard and plucked a fresh bag of chips. I was starving. I had just started to pull open the bag of chips when the banging started. Boom, boom, boom. There was a parody of polite knocks. I had no idea how he'd found me. Still to this day, I don't. But it doesn't matter how, just that he did. But I knew who was behind that door, just as the person knew that I was hiding in there somewhere. At the very first echo of Blueberry's first hitting on the door, my legs turned to dust beneath me. The bag of chips burst as I collided with the linoleum. My body's momentum transformed the potato shards into a million traitors, echoing every move. I was sobbing silently, hiding behind the fridge and watching the shadow slide along the floor where I'd just been a second ago. Gazing out the window with that false sense of safety. Boom, boom, boom. Again. Then there was silence. My phone buzzed on the counter. I stretched my arm upward and clutched that little electronic beacon of freedom. A text. It was from a 303 area code. Colorado. Him. The text illuminated the screen.
My dear, I know you're in there. Let me in. I have your favorite Subway sandwich for you. And a surprise.
Jesus, how did he get my number? My sleeve has been pushed back from the reach for my phone. I see the bruises again. A friendly reminder from Blueberry. Some of them are the same shade as his name. The knocks have been quiet, and there's no more shadow on the wooden floor by the window. I remember that there was a click in my brain at the moment. Something finally connected. My survival instincts are finally triggered, and I shift from frozen into overdrive. I am no longer a human. I'm the fucking gazelle running from the lion. Chips crunch under my shoe as I snap up to my feet. Keys and phone in hand, and I run for the sake of everything that I love in this world. I hear the metal creak behind me, back in the kitchen just as I slam the front door open. All that sunlight outside charges every cell in my bruised body. From the front steps, I dive into my car from the open passenger side window. I leave a perfect arc of rubber marks on the driveway as I reverse, swivel my head and scan the yard for him. There's nowhere to hide in this wide open neighborhood. Nothing. He's unseen. The gas pedal is one with the floorboard. I'm thankful the students of the elementary school across the street are not out for recess, because I would have braided them into the sticky tarmac without a second thought if they'd stood between me and my safety. That is the level of my fear. I keep driving, blowing through all yields and stops. I wonder if I'm crazy. My phone buzzes with another text from that Colorado number. No, not crazy. Scared. Not of death. Not yet, anyway. Scared of what he will do to make me return to his normalcy. I am a doll to him. What happens when dolls start to speak? When they run like gazelles away from his playroom rules? What happens if the lion catches the gazelle? I dry heave and sob at once. Oh God, the fear. I feel like he's with me right now, watching. It does occur to me to call the police, but what do I tell them? They would look at me like I was crazy, just like everyone else had assured me that Blueberry was fine. Just odd. So very odd. Maybe I still am the crazy one. I'm going 55 and a 25 after all. But I know that I can't be alone at this moment. I pick up my phone, dial the number for Brandon. He lives the closest. I have to redial twice. Blueberry keeps texting, and the alerts make me exit my keypad. His messages tell me about the lack of appreciation for the things that he does for me. Another dry heave. Still going 55. Finally, I'm able to input all 7 digits.
Hello.
Brandon's voice is an angelic sound. I cry. All that comes out is the name of the street that I'm on. He directs me to park a block away from where I am. I see him. He sees me. I leave the keys in the ignition, but turn the car off. I run across the green field to him. I feel like I can't do anything but run for dear life. Brandon catches me, holds me tight by the arms with big 2 hands. My bruises hurt under his palms. My lungs are on fire. Can't stop my legs from twitching. I babble. I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. He found me. Please don't tell him where I am, Brandon. Please. I collapse on the soft grass. Brandon tells me later on that he pieced the story together from what he could hear me say, curled up in a fetal position in the grass, babbling about blueberries, bruises, and being an object. He wasn't sure what to make of all of it, and admitted that he thought I was back on the shit and was having a bad come down. He then goes to retrieve the keys to my car from the ignition. My phone is on the front seat, still lighting up incessantly with messages from that 303 number. Brandon sees this. He opens up my phone and reads several of the 52 messages sent in the last half hour. He said he couldn't bear to read anymore after seeing the one that included a photo of my open underwear drawer. It dawned on Brandon that Blueberry is inside my home and enjoyed letting me know. Brandon hugged me, talked to me until Carly and Kate got to the park. Carly and Kate took me to their house where they called the police. Brandon has warrants, so he can't be there with us. But before he leaves, he hugs me so fiercely it reminded me that I'm real, not plastic. He whispered into Carly's ear and advises her to check the messages on my phone if she doesn't believe. She makes it to the message where he tells me he will shave my red harlot's hair off if I don't come back and be good. My phone rings. Carly answers. It's my father. Kate drives my car home, and they stay as I hear what happened. The next door neighbor had been in her kitchen when he saw me run out the door and peel out of the driveway. The clue, she said, was how I'd thrown myself into the car through the window, as if I couldn't waste a minute with opening up the door. She went closer to her window to watch the scene. As my car faded away, she looked at the front door of the house and she saw a tall, thin man coming out the front door and staring into the direction I had just gone. She said he looked angry, and I looked terrified. She called the police. My father, unaware of all this, came home soon after the neighbor placed the call. Blueberry was back inside on the front porch by then, perched on the step, watching and waiting. My father stared at the strange boy on his steps. He saw the tire tracks in the absence of my car. Blueberry calmly looked up at my father, met his gaze, and blankly said that he was thinking about getting me a vanity for my birthday. My father told me that Blueberry stood up, placed himself between my dad and the door. My father was a criminal defense attorney for 30 years. He's a stoic, tough man who has defended countless rapists, killers, thieves, addicts, and the truly innocent before a jury of peers. Not much shakes him, but the tremor in my father's voice is perceptible as he tells me this. He stares Blueberry down and simply says, "Do you pay for this house, boy? I don't answer to you. Get out of my way." Blueberry moved. My father then went inside, disturbed by the boy on the stairs and glad that I wasn't home. In the kitchen, he sees the crushed bag of chips on the floor and the mess in the kitchen. He can see the signs of frantic movement etched into the carpeted chips. He can see that the back door is wide open. I would never leave it like that. He also remembers that the front door had been unlocked. He and I shared a paranoia of unlocked doors, and it was then that my father knew something was very wrong. He feels sick and sprints to the front door. "Hey, kid!" he roars at Blueberry, retreating back. He had taken off down the street when he heard the sirens. The police cars called by the neighbor pull up at this point. One patrol goes in pursuit of Blueberry. The other stays to talk with my father, who was calling my phone, and our astute neighbor, who related what she'd seen through the window. The police ask if I know this man, who was on our stairs. Carly gives my phone as an answer. My father sees one over the cop's shoulder, turns pale, and closes his eyes. I see the years go back on his face. I can't stop crying. I can't get a word out. All I can do is lead them all to my bedroom, where Carly holds up the bed skirt as I reach underneath and pull out all 3 keepsake boxes that I have filled with the last 5 years' worth of Blueberry's gifts, and mostly unopened letters. Carly brings me a yearbook. I cry harder and harder as I open up the page with his class photo on it and point at his full name. I'm crying this hard because it's over. I'm crying this hard because it could have been over long before this point. The officers bag up the contents of the boxes, and the flashes of cameras capture any traces of what had happened that afternoon. I give a short statement once I can speak coherently. They don't find Blueberry, but my father secures protective orders quickly with the connections that he has. He looks so tired. It must have been so easy to protect me when I was small, when he could be the barrier between me and the monsters he dealt with on a daily basis. But that time had long since passed. All he could do now was make phone calls and pray to a God that he did not believe in. He didn't tell me about the journal left on the doorstep until years later. The one that he didn't turn over to the police. The one that had the photos of me sleeping, photos of me naked and fresh out the shower, even some of me kissing my ex-boyfriend. Adam's face in these were scratched out and left hollow, all of them taken at times when I assumed I was alone. I arranged to stay the night with Carly. She told me in the morning that I started screaming in my sleep. It did not stop until she crawled into bed with me and wrapped me in her tiny arms. I am grateful to her. I think her touch is what kept me from remembering any nightmares that I had that night. It felt so good to just sleep. We moved soon afterwards, my father and I. We spoke of the incident only once more when I walked into the kitchen of the new house and saw my father at the table with a tumbler of bourbon in his hand, flipping through a mound of papers with the other. They were the letters from Blueberry. He had retrieved them after evidence processed them. He intended to put them in a safety deposit box. And I'll never forget the grim reasoning behind his voice as the lawyer in him spoke.
Well, if you ever turn up murdered, at least I'll have this and that fucking journal to prove exactly who did it.
I haven't seen or heard of Blueberry since that day. It's been 5 years, and it's taken 2 weeks of writing to get all of this out. There's so much to this story, and it's so fucking harrowing, yet relieving, to finally put all of this down together in chronological order and know that I lived through it. Hey everyone, thanks for listening if you stuck around to this point. If you haven't yet, please hit the like button, the subscribe button, and that notification bell to be notified when future episodes come out. If you have a true scary story of your own, feel free to send it to my email or post it to my subreddit. You can stalk me on Twitter, you can stalk me on Facebook, and you can also stalk me on Instagram. All these links are below. Hey, what's going on everybody? Hope you're having a great Easter Sunday. I don't know. Well, obviously I already dropped the ball on my scheduling. Last week or earlier last week, I said that I was going to be doing Tuesdays, themed, Thursdays, true scary stories in the rain. And we had a family emergency and we had to go out of town on early Wednesday morning. So we left and that left me just enough time to finish the episode and get that out on Tuesday night, and I didn't have enough time to finish this episode for Thursday, obviously, because we had a family emergency that kind of took precedence. So hopefully you're not too upset about that. Whatever, shit happens. I know everybody in here or everybody listening should be able to understand that. So hopefully this makes up for it. I also didn't want to rush it because of how good this fucking story is. It's a long one. It's a 3-parter, a true story. And I was gripped the entire time reading it, so I wanted to do it justice by doing it the right way and not rushing it and forcing it. And yeah, so I really hope you enjoyed this story. I think it's a phenomenal story. I wish I could find more like this more often so that we could have really good episodes. But yeah, back on track. I'm going to make sure that I have everything ready to go next week on Tuesday for the themed episode and another True Scary Stories on Thursday. So be out, look on for that. I have the script. I have everything ready. If you are watching Hordes as well for the new episode, that episode will be out next week. I'm planning on Fridays to drop those episodes. So look out for that on Friday. That's going to be a really fucking good one. So again, be on the lookout for that. And yeah, have a good Easter, whatever, or just a Sunday. If you don't celebrate Easter, that's cool too. I love you all. Cheers. I'll see you on Tuesday.